People don't need to do extended fasting to get hormone results. There's a lot of women out there that they've done so much extended fasting that that's the only way that they say that they can lose weight. So guess what? We have to fix that. We got to fix their metabolism because if extended fasting is the only way they can lose weight, that's a problem.
I've seen people literally with a stopwatch not allowing themselves to eat until target window.
Yeah.
But then they'll pay no attention to what foods they're consuming in that window. And it's like, that's not what's going to get you to the goal in the most efficient manner possible.
It has to be a balance. It's great for some and not others.
If you are training hard, but you're not eating enough, then obviously you're going to be quote unquote overtrained because you're not getting ample nutrition to recover properly from those sessions. But if you're eating appropriately, I mean, you can train hard, intense lifts. And we are live. Dani, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? Great to see you.
Likewise. The last time you were on the show it's been over a year now, right?
I think so. Yeah, it's been a while.
What's been new and exciting in your world since last time we spoke?
Gosh, I think that all things carnivore and keto, of course, but just kind of diving into some different rabbit holes recently. And I like to do a lot of research for clients. So I feel like just deeper into the minerals and antioxidants and, just supplements, things that, clients can utilize to make the things that they're doing, I feel like work better in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think we both kind of have that foundational approach with like making sure the macros are dialed in and the food and all of that. But I get a lot of clients that are kind of looking to go beyond that point. I don't know about you, but they want more, they want to go beyond keto and beyond carnivore, and they want kind of like the next steps, next level.
You've been coaching for quite some time, as have I. What have you noticed in like the trajectory of the online coaching space? Like, where do you think it's going? I guess I feel like, keto kind of reached its bubble in 2019, I think was when it peaked. And then carnivore's kind of been given the halo since then. What do you think about the future? Like when you planned for what's next, what are you seeing?
So I feel like there's kind of like two camps. I feel like there's the camp that will always be like it's keto or it's carnivore and it's food only, and that's kind of more the dogmatic side of things. And then I feel like there's this sort of other camp that's like what's beyond that. And that's kind of where I feel like, at least in my practice and my coaching is going. I don't know about the rest of the world, but I think that's where we can get into some of like into more integrative protocols and peptides and really next leveling, even on the workout side of things, because I feel like there's still a lot of places, especially women, can go with their workouts without having, worrying about injuring themselves and all that kind of stuff. I know that's kind of two completely different areas, but that's kind of what I see as places where, we can really kind of take things to a next step, so to speak.
Well, I feel like when people get in and they're totally ignorant around nutrition and they start dabbling into macros and different dietary protocols, like there's obviously a massive pool of clients that would benefit from those fundamental basics. But I feel like as a coach, if that's pretty much your only thing, then you got to kind of differentiate yourself and dive a little bit deeper. I mean, like my specific niche has been like the bodybuilding realm, like getting people down bodybuilding.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of interest around the hormones right now, HRT, TRT, just all the hormonal functions. I get pitched podcast guests all the time that's their stick, the hormones, the peptides. So that seems to be like super popular right now. And that's not really diet specific necessarily. So that seems to be where a lot of the interest is headed, it seems.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to bring that up. Like, it's not diet specific. And if you really want to be optimized, hormones, peptides, supplements, like whatever modality you're going to use, the foundational pieces have to be there. Like that stuff is not, it's like a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. So I won't even go down that rabbit hole with clients if they don't have the foundational pieces dialed in. And I think that even goes for like fasting. And I think you and I both have some similar kind of, thoughts around fasting, is that it's not maybe right for everyone. It shouldn't be done all the time, that kind of stuff. But I think even that, like, I feel like I like to say, like, there can be seasons of fasting where it can be really great. And then there can be other seasons where it's not ideal, and making sure that they're fueling before they get to that fasting state. So I think all those things, like, the diet aspect, the macros, those foundational pieces have to be in place to start, number one, for someone to go down those rabbit holes, and number two, for them to actually be successful and then all work together. And I think that like the common question I get, and like you said, you get pitched a lot for a lot of these different things, is like, are they fads? Are peptides just a fad? Or what are my thoughts around HRT? And they're all not fads, and they're all great if they're used the way they're supposed to be used. If the gut is working properly, your liver is detoxing properly, you're living those foundational pieces in your lifestyle so that you can give those things the opportunity to work. And there's also seasons of using all of that stuff too. So I think that all of that is super important.
One thing I've always appreciated about you is you take, and maybe this is due to the functional medicine background, but like you take a very holistic approach to every recommendation you give out, and you treat everyone as an individual. Like you're looking at their history, their goals, where they want to take things, where their shortfalls have been in the past. And I feel like a lot of people just don't have that foundational base. Like they're just throwing a dart at the wall in the dark and hoping that something sticks. And when it comes to like hormones and peptides and biologics and any of that stuff, like you can't really take that unmeasured approach safely. It's just like not a good protocol.
Yeah, and that's where I think people get, I want to say, jaded, and they also get, maybe even can cause some frustration, because they might see their best friend doing something, or somebody on the internet, some influencer saying something about, some protocol that worked great for them. And maybe metabolically that person is completely different. So someone goes and spends a bunch of money on some protocol that they heard was supposed to be the next best thing since sliced bread, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they try it and it fails, or they have some sort of negative response. And we do need to look at biochemical individuality, even with something as simple as macros. So it's like, if we're not looking at the individuality with macros, then we have to really kind of take a step back and realize that everything that's going to follow that also should be looked at from an individual perspective. Even with hormone therapy, like two people that present with the same symptoms, they might need a completely different hormone protocol. So I get a lot of clients that will come to me and say, oh, my doctor recommended this hormone replacement or that hormone replacement protocol. And next question is, did they test you before you started this? Nope, they just went based on symptoms. No wonder it failed. No wonder you felt terrible. You had all these sort of flare up of quote unquote hormone symptoms, because when someone in their 40s and 50s are experiencing perimenopause, which is of course crazy hormone changes, or they're already postmenopausal, and they go to a hormone replacement therapy, and that doctor gives them some high dose because they're showing symptoms of needing that, they might in fact need that. However, if their hormone receptors have been quiet, or like I like to say, sleeping for years because their hormones were low, maybe even prior to menopause, and you get given a big shot or dose of hormones, it's going to wake everything up. But it's not only going to wake everything up, it's going to piss everything off. No, excuse me, but well, that's what happens. And so then someone has all these crazy symptoms. They can't figure out why their sleep is worse. Everything is just worse. And so there was no in between, as far as like, let's look at what's actually happening. Let's go low and slow with however we're going to support this person in the therapy that they need to have, and then slowly increase the dose so they can, number one, be effective. But I like to say, not everyone needs, like, if you don't need a super high dose, why use it? Number one, because you shouldn't stress out your receptors that way. And number two, I mean, if we can use less of something exogenous, it's a more budget friendly way to go, like, truth be told. So there's multiple reasons why, we want to just take things step by step. And, one of my biggest pet peeves is as far as hormone optimization goes, is when someone comes to me and says, they just gave me this protocol based on symptoms and they didn't do any hormone testing. It makes my head
Yeah.
want to explode.
I literally just got a client that signed up to do, a prep with me. And
Mhm.
she was talking about her exogenous hormone use that she just started per her doctor's recommendation. And I said, okay, great. Are they doing like follow up tests every 3 months or so to see what numbers are looking like? And their response was, no, they just test me once a year, maybe, and they just prescribe me all this stuff. So I just crazy out there. It's the Wild West when it comes to the hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's so many. So I used to have a very not, we don't need bioidenticals, we don't need hormones approach. This was like 10 or 15 years ago. And I'm willing to educate myself and research and be wrong about things that I used to believe. And I will say that as long as it's done properly, it can be life changing for women, especially, and men, honestly. And then again, it goes back to how it's approached, when it's approached, all those things are going to, make a huge difference.
Totally. I'm pretty sure on the last podcast, you and I dove fairly deep into the hormones, but I don't think we touched on the peptides much at all. Has that
Mm-hmm.
been something you've been focusing on more over the past year?
Yeah, I think I started using peptides probably a couple of years ago with clients, and it's kind of exploded just on social media with lots of, unpopular opinion, but GLP talk with the
Hmm.
glucagon-like peptides. And then, I like to tell people like there's a lot of other peptides aside from GLPs if people don't want to use GLPs, and GLPs aren't for everyone for sure. But there's cellular health, brain function, hormones, life, like there's a lot of different peptides that can support different areas so that people can benefit from. And again, I think that goes back to the one size never fits all and using something that you're comfortable with. So if you're not comfortable with something or you think something isn't going to work, you better believe it's not going to work, right? Like the mindset is the first part of it. So, anyways, back to your question. Yeah, I think that I'm seeing a lot of, improvements. And again, clients wanting to go kind of beyond carnivore, beyond keto with their protocols, once we get through their initial things that we're working on with rebalancing as far as their gut and detoxification. And then they're coming back to me and saying, like, okay, what's next? Like the first round of things like worked really great, but what if I want to continue? What can I do now for my health and longevity?
Totally. So on the peptide note, let's just kind of dive into peptides. We'll start with GOPs because those are definitely
Mm,
hot right now.
yeah.
People are throwing away or throwing out their 2 cents on peptides for better or worse nonstop on social. Um, who would be a good candidate for the GOPs? Let's kind of start there.
Yeah, so I think the first and foremost important thing to realize is that GLPs are beneficial for more than just weight loss and fat loss. They can help with brain health, they can help with autoimmune function, and just, longevity overall. So I think that somebody that doesn't necessarily need weight loss or fat loss, someone that's looking to lower inflammation, someone that might be looking for, help with autoimmune stuff going on. So all of those things can be symptoms, if you will, or things that someone could benefit from using a GLP. And I think this might be on your mind, but I'm just going to kind of dive into it as far as like the amount of the GLP and the dosing and microdosing. So I'm not talking about pharmaceutical doses where there's lots of side effects and all of that kind of stuff. I'm talking about, in some cases, 1/15th, 1/7 to 1/15th of what's actually prescribed by like a medical doctor can be used. I've seen in research that's, highly beneficial. So we're talking about a very, very small amount of many compounds that are actually bioidentical to what our body is already doing, or
So that would
maybe
be
not
considered
doing. And that's why we need to, that's why it can help and support what the body needs to be doing.
right, and that would be kind of used in the context of a microdosing scenario to kind of build up some of these anti-inflammatory properties, right?
Yeah, and so microdosing kind of has two levels. So number one, I look at microdosing on a weekly basis. So it's the total amount that someone's going to get weekly, but it's also the frequency. So with some peptides, if you still give one bolus in a period of time, let's say over a week, that's still going to desensitize those receptors faster than if you break up that amount over, 2 to 3 times over a 7-day period. So the goal is for someone who's willing, of course, to use it 2 to 3 times a week in much smaller amounts. So you're putting a steady amount of whatever that peptide is into the system versus, again, even a total microdose at, let's say, 2 or 2.5 milligrams of something per week, that's still a larger amount total. It's still going to wear out those receptors faster, which is what we're trying to avoid.
Right, right. I personally have not gone in and requested a GLP from any of my providers.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Because people that are using it primarily in the context of weight loss, like, is it fairly easy for them to get prescribed GLPs? Are they pretty much getting just a standard dose? Are they getting those prescriptions with, short term or long term pass? Like, what does that look like for the average consumer who is hearing this talk of GLPs and adamant about using it for losing 20 pounds?
Yeah, I think that you're going to get a varying of responses from doctors depending on the person's doctor. So there's some doctors out there that are willing to give it out like they would, anything else, very openly, freely. Here's your prescription, here's your medical dose. And then there's others who aren't going to be as forthright in terms of those prescriptions. What we need to be careful of, or what people should be careful of, especially with the, and the Western side of things, is the pharmaceutical doses, and that's going to be the higher doses that in a perfect world someone would be avoiding, because the goal is, again, the microdosing, to use as little as possible to keep those receptors, sensitized, if you will, but also the foundational pieces first. So the difference, I think, for a lot of doctors is going to be that they're not teaching nutrition. They're not teaching the foundational work. They might say, oh, go ahead and, lose weight, eat less, move more, lose weight, and here's, this might help you. And so where that can go wrong is higher dose causes lots of side effects like nausea and fatigue, because people aren't, they're not learning to fix their electrolytes and balance their minerals. And when these GLPs upregulate metabolism, you need more minerals, you need more nutrients. But what's happening when they're overprescribed? They're not hungry, they're nauseous, they're not getting their nutrients, they're certainly not getting their protein, they're not getting their minerals, and then all of a sudden the GLP causes a side effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not the GLP's fault. It's
Yeah.
all the things that we're doing that isn't what needs to be done to help these compounds be effective.
Yeah, I was getting my hair cut the other day, and my barber was talking about, she, I guess, lost 20 pounds. And I would have to assume that her scenario is very similar to the masses, but she was basically saying that her dosage is almost up, her prescription's almost lapsed. And she very evidently had no conversation around nutrition with her doctor, but she was basically just raving about how she no longer needs to eat the full sleeve of Oreos because of the GLP. She's only able to eat half a sleeve now. She's lost the 20 pounds, and I asked her about her protein consumption. She's like, well, I get most of my protein from peanut butter, which is not a great option for protein. So it's very obvious that they weren't getting much conversation around nutrition.
Right.
And to me, not having that fundamental, mindset shift towards making things sustainable as a lifestyle, because you don't want to be a beholden to any drug or exogenous
Compound. Yeah.
source. Yeah, if you can help it. But no awareness or knowledge toward nutrition, lifestyle factors, movement patterns, any of that stuff, and just simply using the drug as a way to eat less food sustainably. But then I'm assuming, no conversation from the doctor around the long-term effects of eating far too little for your body's needs, and the downstream effect it'll have on metabolic rates and therefore lean muscle loss, especially if they're not training. So I feel like I am not against them by any means, but if they're prescribed without any of that conversation and given, then people are just flying blind.
100%. And I will say, as much as I am for them, if the scenario is right for that person, I am 100% against them with everything you just talked about. And I'm trying to be really vocal about that, because people need to understand that these compounds themselves don't cause the side effects. It's the way they're used and the improper, let's say, training of how to use them, getting your protein, resistance training, not taking so much that you are nauseous and it's causing someone to undereat, because I think we've both experienced working with undereaters and reverse dieting them to get them back to a place where they can function metabolically and be able to take in the right amount of nutrients so they can get their body composition goals and all of that. So I will absolutely say, as much as I am for them, I am against them in those types of scenarios because that's what gives them a bad name, and that's what's all over the media.
Hmm. Because the primary mechanism of action with the GLPs is the appetite suppressant effect, right?
Well, I call it appetite balance, and it's going to be the effect on glucose, or I should say blood sugar regulation, you know, motility with gastric emptying, like slowing gastric emptying, which for some people sounds really scary. And that's people are saying, like, oh, this is why people are getting all these digestive issues and constipation, all this stuff. Well, what I see is that these are all the same people that had tons of gut issues prior to using this compound. So again, they use this compound, it exacerbates a problem they already have. And then what happens? They just blame the compound without looking at what they were doing prior that, they could have fixed, for lack of a better word, and then everything would work properly. So to your question, yes, it's going to help with blood sugar regulation and as far as that goes, but what the findings are at this point is, then it starts to work on inflammation, and then it starts to work on other areas so that, again, if you're not taking too much, you shouldn't be nauseous, you shouldn't be completely fatigued, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Are most doctors, again, this is, I'm assuming, going to be very specific to the doctor, but when they start prescribing this, as a general rule of thumb, how long are they typically prescribing it for? Or is there any
Well,
standardized care there?
yeah, so I think it depends if you're talking functional medicine doctor, which would be more Eastern than like a Western. So as far as Western medicine, they're, the higher pharmaceutical amounts. And in my experience from people I've talked to, there's not really an end date, so to speak. So they're just sort of putting the patient on it. And that's, they increase as they go because you end up building up a tolerance to it. And one of the other important things, aside from the microdosing that we were talking about earlier, is the cycling of these compounds or peptides. And this really goes with any peptide. So, a 4-week, 8-week, 12-week, 16-week cycle using them at a lower amount and then breaking off of them. So, in that cycling off period, it gives those, receptors a break. Then you can look at, okay, what has this done? How do I feel? What adjustments do I need to make? A multitude of things so that then you can evaluate after the cycle off, so to speak, is what's next. Do I need to go back on it? Do I have more weight loss and fat loss goals? Did someone have 100 pounds versus 20 pounds to lose? And what else can they do at that point? And, hormones, of course, play a role as well.
Yeah, no, totally. Um, is there like specific blood work markers that you would recommend people dive into and kind of establish baselines on prior to getting on a GLP, and then to kind of follow up with and, just have a pulse on as they're using the GLPs?
Yeah, so I think specific to the GLP, if I was just going to pick a few blood markers, I would say glucose, A1C, fasting insulin, for sure. I would look at other inflammatory markers as well, such as maybe homocysteine, um, fibrinogen, ferritin, and just kind of see where someone is overall with various types of inflammation. I would rather, with clients, I run like a comprehensive blood work so I can see it's got actually like 91 total markers on it. And I want to see their liver function. I want to see their kidney function. I want to see all the things that are kind of happening in between those inflammatory markers, because those inflammatory markers are great to watch, but they're not functions of how they got inflamed to begin with. That's where all the other markers come in. So if someone can get those, would be the baseline to look at, and then kind of a further deep dive and make sure it's, of course, interpreted properly to see what those other different areas are doing. That's going to be kind of your best bet. And then aside from that, looking at hormones, from sex hormones to, potentially cortisol and adrenals, if someone can look at those via urine versus blood. I don't feel like blood is not a great measure for cortisol in general, but all of those things should be things that should be monitored and looked at with all peptide use, not just GLPs. And then, of course, whatever peptide protocol someone's doing, GLP or not, all these things can be part of the picture and part of the plan, and adjustments made based on what they're seeing, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Apart from the GLPs, what other peptides that get you interested?
So I think a lot of the cellular health peptides, SS31, MOTS-C, just to name a couple of them, because I think at the end of the day, when we look at overall health, our mitochondria, our cells, our cellular health, ATP, energy, all of those things, like that's kind of what it's the gas to the tank, the gas to the vehicle that's going to get everything going. So if your cells are a mess, if your mitochondria is not working, if you're not getting energy, if you're not able to turn nutrients into energy that you're getting from your food, all of those all of those things, are going to sort of crash and burn at some point. So that's another area that has been super interesting to me, and kind of watching clients like improve from a cellular health, because also a lot of people come to me for not just weight loss and fat loss, but maybe you can relate to this, like longevity, like they want to be their best, of course, body composition, vanity, all of that. But most of my clients are 40 and above, and they want long-term health and longevity. And they would like to, they'd like to look the way they want to look, on their way there. And I always tell clients, like, even if they have, maybe you hear this, like all in the carnivore community, especially, like you have to heal in order to lose weight. Yes, that's true. You have to rebalance what's going on from the inside out. But it's almost to the point where there's a lot of women that are even ashamed to say like that they have weight loss and fat loss goals, because everyone, especially in the carnivore community, has said, oh no, you have to heal your body first before you can lose weight. And yeah, that's true to a certain degree. I've always said, weight loss happens as a byproduct of the body being healthy and in balance, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a focus on weight loss and fat loss as you're, working on your glucose and your metabolism and your liver detox function and your gut health and all the things in between. And so I think that we just need to be like, I like to be realistic. I mean, truth be told, 20 years ago when I started down this journey, I wanted to look a certain way. I was in my 20s, and I wanted to look a certain way, and vanity was the reason I started. And obviously that's changed now. Oh my God, I'm 48, which sounds really old when I say that out loud, and I've been doing this almost 20 years. But at that point in time, yes, I wanted to look a certain way, but I also, with tons of hormone and digestive issues at that point, didn't know how I would get to my 40s, like if I had to continue down the path that I was on. And so obviously that, sent me down a path looking for something different. And I'm grateful that I found everything that I've found since then. But I think that it's okay to focus on healing your body, whatever that is. I like to say rebalancing the body from the inside out. And then, yeah, weight loss and fat loss is a byproduct of it, but it's okay for women to have those goals. I mean, you work with competitive athletes for bodybuilding, so obviously there's vanity there.
Yeah,
But
it's all how you frame it. I mean, I feel like vanity is not a negative thing if it can be leveraged as a motivating factor that helps build
100%.
momentum, and you can do so in a sustainable fashion. Like, I don't think it's bad to want to look and feel better, because then you become a better vehicle for helping others accomplish the same thing. I mean, your body is a billboard. I mean, you only have one body, and how you present yourself based off of how you look is going to heavily influence what stock people put in what you say. And I feel like if you frame it that way and you're trying to look, feel, and perform better, then the likelihood that you'll be able to positively impact others to do something similar is significantly amplified.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I believe, I've always believed in walking my talk. So, with things that I do with clients, there's almost, I've kind of walked the talk with the protocols and different things before I've asked a client to do it. So I'm a huge proponent of making sure that I'm doing what I'm recommending, and everything in between.
100%. What else in the carnivore space specifically has gotten under your skin as of late? How could we hedge against it? What's going on that you're not a fan of?
Yeah, so I think let's talk about fasting for a second, because I know that's something that comes up with your, probably you and your clients a lot, and I'm sure you get tons of questions on it. But I feel like fasting has its place. And it's one of those things, like I said, like fasting seasons, like you can have seasons of fasting where it works really well. And you can have seasons where it's like the last thing your body might want to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, especially with carnivore, because a lot of people just say, like, oh, with carnivore, you should naturally get to a place where you can fast and it's not a problem, which I agree with because that's going to, to a certain degree show that someone's glucose and things are a little more balanced when they're not looking for food 10 times a day and all of that. But that being said, extended fasting, people don't need to do extended fasting to get hormone results. There's a lot of women out there that they've done so much extended fasting that that's the only way that they say that they can lose weight. So guess what? We have to fix that. We got to fix their metabolism because if extended fasting is the only way they can lose weight, that's a problem. So I feel like it has to be a balance. It's great for some and not others. But I feel like to say that it should be one way or the highway, which is a lot of what is in the carnivore space. I feel like I'm like a rogue carnivore because I talk about a lot of this stuff that's like, how many different unpopular opinions do I have? And I'm guessing that, I know that you and I are kind of on the same page with some things. So that's kind of a big one that I feel like, it's okay to eat 3 meals a day on carnivore. It's okay to never fast again if you don't want to. It's okay to have sometimes when you're fasting and maybe you are getting 2 meals a day and fasting 16 or 18 hours and it feels great. And you can wake up one morning and all of a sudden that could, not be what's right for you at that point. In fact, about 2 months ago, I was doing really well with more intermittent fasting. And in the last few weeks, when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, food sounds really good right now. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's no way that I feel like I could fast more than, like an overnight, maybe 12 to 14 hours. And I feel like it's those seasons that make things metabolically healthy, where your body isn't doing the same thing every single day for 6 months on end. And then all of a sudden it's adapted to what that is. And then you have to fix it because it becomes a problem. So I think that it's more beneficial to ebb and flow and follow the intuition as long as I like to say, like the waters still aren't muddy from doing the wrong things for so many years. But that sort of intuitive sense can really kick in for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I feel like, I've played around with various different types of fasting, but I don't ever recommend fasting as the primary driver for
Weight
reaching
loss.
compositional
Yeah.
goal or weight loss. Yeah, I mean, like, I never recommend fasting for weight loss because ideally you're trying to find a way that's sustainable to reach that compositional goal, and extended fasting indefinitely is not really sustainable. It kind of winds up in death. So you don't really want to make that your pivotal landmark foundational
Yeah.
piece. And if you're going to be in a caloric deficit to some extent, that's a stressor on the body. And from an autophagy standpoint, like you're accomplishing many of the same goals by simply being in a deficit as you would with an extended fast. So doing both simultaneously is just too much of an unnecessary stressor on the body. Like you don't need to do both, and you'll likely be doing more harm than good trying to do both. So yeah, I'm never recommending fasting for weight loss purposes.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, because I've heard you talk about that before and I just relate so much to it, is that most people use fasting so they feel like it's easier to be in a deficit in a shorter eating window because they have less time to eat, right?
Mhm.
So then it ends up backfiring for all the reasons we're talking about. But what they're saying is, oh, it's easier for me to be in a deficit when I'm fasting because I'm only eating for 6 hours. So therefore, it's easy to split, 1,500 calories into 2 meals and eat that in 6 hours, and then, mentally tell myself it's time to stop eating or restricted you know time frame or whatever. And so that's where, again, like you're talking about, I think it backfires.
Yeah, and there'll be times like when I'm lower on my calories and I've only got, I don't know, 1,900 calories, 2,000 calories at the tail end of a prep to consume. I prefer to eat that in a more confined feeding window so that I can actually feel full from that one
Mhm.
larger meal as opposed to multiple smaller meals broken throughout the day. But none of the protocol is relevant to or related to like fasting specific. It's just kind of a personal psychological preference as to how I like to consume my meals when I've got so many calories allotted for the day. But yeah, I
Yeah.
see all these drastic, changes as to what their fasting window is without really any thought being paid toward the amount or the types of foods they're consuming when they're breaking that fast. So they're not making the most of the low hanging fruit first and foremost. I've seen people literally with a stopwatch not allowing themselves to eat until the hour strikes 9 or whatever to hit that target window.
Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, but then they'll pay no attention to what foods they're consuming in that window, and it's like that's not what's going to get you to the goal in the most efficient manner possible.
Right. I think also, as far as the workouts go and meal timing, so a big question I get is about, do I think women will just use, fast as a general sense, more like intermittent fasting, but do you think women can fast and build muscle at the same time? Because there's a lot of information out there that women shouldn't fast, you can't build muscle, all this stuff, especially over 40. And if your macros are correct, if your protein intake's correct, if your sources of protein, so going back to our, peanut butter is a source of, see, peanut butter is not a source of protein, as we both know. If those sources are correct and if the meal timing is correct, you absolutely can build muscle as long as all the foundational pieces are in place. If you're not overtraining and overstressed and you're sleeping well and all of that, so I think that obviously the workouts and stuff play a role in that as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you can people take for granted how easy it is to build and preserve muscle, and they get so caught up in majoring in the minors of like having a anabolic window protein shake of 30 grams with ample leucine to preserve muscle post training. It's like people get so hung up on these little minutia details that aren't necessary. I mean, you're spiking muscle protein synthesis just simply by training. So that checks the box for once throughout the course of a 24-hour period. And as long as you're consuming ample nutrition in the right, macronutrient distribution over the course of a 24-hour window, then you're checking all the boxes. You're fine. Like people
Right.
don't need to fixate on the things that don't really matter because that fixation makes it all the more unsustainable for them. And they just get stressed out and deviate and decide to, totally do something counter to what they need to do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Hey, I have a question I want to ask you if you don't mind. It has to do with like resistance and cardio.
Rock and roll.
Because obviously I work with a lot of like most of my clients are women over 40, and there's so much, hit training, zone two, don't do cardio, just some background. So for me, years ago, I was doing, 2 hours of cardio a day. I was at my heaviest at that point. That's when I had all my hormone issues. Fast forward now, mostly resistance training, some of my cardio I get from riding my horses. But a big question I get in my communities, both my group program and my wellness community, is just around like my thoughts on cardio, for weight loss, resistance training, how it all plays in. So I would love to ask you your thoughts on all of this and, kind of deep dive on this for a few minutes, as well.
Yeah. So when it comes to optimizing fat loss and preserving as much lean tissue as possible, which should be the goal, like you don't want to just focus on the weight loss. Like you want to lose as much fat while
Yeah,
preserving as much muscle as you can. Obviously, if you're in a caloric deficit to prevent your body from becoming more catabolic than necessary, keeping that muscle in high demand is key. So with the energy and time you have allotted for the day, prioritize weight training, continuing to lift heavy so that those tissues are kept in demand and your body is less likely to, forfeit that lean tissue. So that's primary, objective number one.
awesome.
Secondarily, from a cardio standpoint, like I like to treat cardio as a minimum viable dose. My training pretty much stays consistent throughout a fat loss phase. My nutrition types are pretty much consistent, whether I'm in a building phase or a cutting phase. I'll just, manipulate the macro distribution and overall quantity of food I'm consuming. So that's changing. So that's the primary lever I'm applying to my body to create the pressure that results in the fat loss. And then
Love
I'll
that.
treat cardio as a minimum viable dose. So I want to do as little cardio as possible to elicit a favorable response. So prioritizing the weight training, prioritizing the macronutrient distribution and caloric intake as the primary lever nutritionally speaking. And then if and when my body starts to plateau from those changes, then I can slowly titrate up the cardio to get things moving again. But I mean, it's really, really minimal. Like my total cardio throughout the course of a week in a competition prep may be 2 or 3 20-minute sessions on the Stairmaster at the very high end of things. And I may start with zero cardio. I probably would
Hmm.
start zero cardio. And
Hmm.
then as I get 1, 2, 3 months in, I may incrementally increase that by one additional minute on the Stairmaster or one intensity level higher on the Stairmaster, but never really exceeding 20 minutes in a session, which is a stark contrast to 2 hours on the cardio.
Of course. Yeah, I love that because it really, I think, plays into the stress hormones too. So when you start with such a low baseline, you don't have to then worry about crossing over into uh, stressing out the cortisol even more because you've started at no cardio, like you said. And then once you get into it, 20 minutes is kind of that push for you, so to speak. And again, of course, I love prioritizing the resistance training. I of
Yeah.
course learned that the hard way over the years, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and if you've only got so many calories coming in, you're depleted anyways. Like you want to maximize performance towards that resistance training. So like if you're doing 2 hours of cardio a day and then weight training, your weight training is going to be hindered. Like it's going to take longer to replenish muscle glycogen. So I
Right.
typically don't do cardio at all. Or if I do, it's for, 15, 20 minutes post workout once I've prioritized that training session. And it's super minimal with it. Like I try to do as little cardio as possible. Now, that said, you want to make sure you're still in cardiovascular health. Like you want to be able
Right.
to
Yeah.
breathe properly. Like if you're in a building phase and trying to prioritize building muscle, if you get winded on your fourth rep of squats due to, incapacity with, cardiovascular function, that's not a good thing. But you don't want to be focused on the cardio. And a lot of people, they just do way too much of it. I mean, I've talked with people that are literally obsessive walkers. They'll walk like a marathon a day, literally in
Hmm.
step count. And like it's very hard to recover from that. Your joints, your ligaments, your muscle glycogen, everything's going to be stressed out. Hormone function, everything's going to be taking a hit. And it's not necessary. And then, I mean, if you're doing 7 days a week of cardio and you're plateauing, what are you going to do? Add an eighth day of cardio? Like, good luck,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, well, and that's funny that I mean it's that all is so true. And just back to peptides for a second, because people will often ask me like, what are the best peptides for recovery? This was another area of interest for me that, why I got into them. And I'll always tell people like, you can't, you can't out peptide overtraining. Like you can't use peptides and overtrain and then, have them work the way they're supposed to. So you still can't overtrain. You still have to be doing all the things in the right way, and that's when those uh above and beyond protocols will help with recovery, but you can't just overtrain and add peptides and expect them to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, totally agree. And a lot of people, like, overtraining gets a lot of the limelight, and it's honestly relatively hard to overtrain. It's not nearly as difficult to become undernourished. Like, if you are training hard but you're not eating enough, then obviously you're going to be quote unquote overtrained because you're not getting ample nutrition to recover properly from those sessions. But if you're eating appropriately, I mean, you can train hard, intense lifts, 5, 6 days a week, and as long as you're getting ample recovery, ample sleep, like you're not really going to be overtraining or at risk of overtraining. So a lot of people are hesitant to lift hard, but they're hesitant to eat more too. So like if you do that, then you're going to be able to train harder and then you're going to see more muscle gain. You're going to see better compositional changes. Like you got to fuel for your body's activities.
And so where do you see like stress management play into that? Because I agree with everything you just said, but especially with women, when life happens and there's lots of external stressors going on and their adrenals are already out of balance and they're dealing with thyroid issues. I'd love to kind of hear your take on that because I think that overtraining can happen much easier in those scenarios. And so I try to have clients be super careful. And I like to look at lab work before I make workout recommendations for them in a lot of cases. So I'd love to kind of hear what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in that scenario, like if you're going through menopausal years and your hormones are all jacked up, your cortisol's, through the roof, and you're not sleeping, you're not eating, then yeah, in that context, it becomes exponentially easier to check that overtraining box. Um,
Hmm.
but if your hormones are stable, if you're getting ample sleep, and a lot of people aren't doing that. I'm guilty of not getting ample sleep. Like I'm
Yeah, it's
probably
hard.
overtraining by way of not sleeping enough. But I'm not having a problem eating enough fuel, and I think
Right.
that if you eat enough food of the right food, that's going to do wonders for hormone function as well, obviously, as you know, and it makes recovering from those training sessions just so much easier. I mean, a lot of people, they're not recovering from their training, but they're also not training enough for it to become habitual to their body, where their body can acclimate to that load. So
Hmm.
they'll work out, they'll have not worked out, be chronically under eating and not getting enough sleep. Then they'll work out hard for a session or two, get DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, feel terrible, chalk it up as overtraining, and then go back to reducing their calories by another 500 calories in order to lose 10 pounds. Like they're just going about it the completely wrong way. So get your hormones checked, get a good baseline, make sure you're in a good place hormonally,
Yeah.
eat the right foods, get ample sleep, but then train consistently. And with training too, like you got to give your body, I mean, it's definitely like if you look at the lab work after a training session, like it looks like everything's totally jacked up. Inflammation markers are through the roof. C-reactive protein, glucose is elevated. Like on paper, on lab work, training looks like it's the worst thing you could possibly do for your body.
Hmm.
But then with enough time, once your body acclimates to that and recognizes it as a hormetic response, a positive effect, then it's much easier to recognize, okay, am I overtraining? Do I need to take a deload week? And once you've kind of got the baseline established, then you'll be able to know what your body needs more intuitively. And you'll know when it's a good time to take a deload week where you continue to eat at the same intake, fuel yourself properly, but then have a week where you do 50% intensity and just let all of the joints, ligaments, and muscle tissue repair before you go into another high intense session. So like people oftentimes don't have all the fundamental stuff in place so that they can recognize when that time is appropriate.
I love that. And so I can kind of relate to what you're saying because a lot of clients ask me, oh, if I don't work out for a day or if I take a rest day, should I have a different macro formula or should I change my intake? And I always tell them, no, whatever macros I give you are based on the sum total of everything you're doing. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely possible that on some days some rest days, you might be not as hungry. So then don't force yourself to eat. And for me, it's actually opposite. A lot of times on a rest day, my hunger catches up with me. So I'm not as hungry on my super active days, but then again, like I said, it might catch up with me. So the same goes for a deload week. I would not change someone's macro intake or recommendations just based on the fact that it's a deload week, because maybe if they are hungrier, maybe their body needs that, and I think that I love what you just said. And I think that it's important to intuitive eating. We both say that, but it's like it's not intuitive for some people. That's why tracking can be so valuable and being aware of what we're actually getting. But I do think that there's a time where someone can get to a place where they can track for awareness, but also then become intuitive and be able to recognize hunger signals and recognize, okay, I'm actually not as hungry today, so I don't have to finish all the food that's on paper, so to speak, in terms of like what the numbers are telling me or what the macros are telling me. And maybe if the next day they're hungrier, then maybe they either want more protein or they want more fat or they want more of both. And they can go ahead and do that, even though it might be quote unquote over what we've given a client, as far as what their intake should be. And I understand it might be a little different for competition prep, for just as, specific as somebody needs to be for that. But I'm just talking about like in general body fat,
Yeah, no,
deload, composition, all of that.
totally agree. I feel like the pinnacle of health is when people can get to a point where they can maintain a very desirable body composition somewhat effortlessly, intuitively eating. Like I think
Hmm.
that becomes the pinnacle. Like when you can reach that, then you're golden. Like from a bodybuilding standpoint, you can't intuitively get down to 3.9% body fat because your body doesn't want to go there naturally. Like you've got to push it beyond what its natural hormonal signaling molecules are telling you to do. And that's why I track when I'm trying to get down, lean for competition. But
Hmm.
I don't have to track year round to maintain a very healthy and fit physique. And I don't think people should have to. When it comes to tracking, like it's same as any wearable device or ring or Garmin watch. Like you don't want to become a slave to it. You don't want to
Reliant,
be
yeah.
beholden to it. Um, but it's honestly not too dissimilar from those that are moderators with consumption and those that need to be abstainers completely from certain macronutrient food groups. Like figure out the individual needs for what is sustainable and applicable and reliable for that individual, and then just make that work for them. Like I like tracking, so I don't feel bad by tracking, even if I don't necessarily need to. But at the same time, I'm totally just as comfortable not tracking unless I've got a specific goal that I'm trying to reach. If you've got a very specific goal and you've been plateauing and not actionably reaching it, then what can be measured can be managed. Just with the blood work too, like you want to be able to actually know those numbers so you can manipulate them accordingly.
Yeah, and I think like back to your question from earlier, like what do I, what is kind of in the carnivore space that might be the unpopular opinion? That's kind of my verbiage of your question. But I think tracking is absolutely falls into that category because there's some that say you never need to track on carnivore. Calories don't exist. And you know what? Okay, if calories didn't exist, that's fine. Let's just pretend. The bottom line is like you can't take in more energy than your body burns and expect not to store it. So whether you call it energy, whether you call it calories, whether you want to track or not track, energy balance is definitely a thing. And I think like tracking for awareness is highly beneficial for many people. And even if it's not perfect, not exact, and you use that as a bridge, so to speak, to kind of bridge the gap between I have no idea why I'm not losing to getting to where they want to be and becoming aware of what you're actually taking in, because most people are not aware of the cream in their coffee, the butter on their steak, all of that. And then getting to a place where they know and they can move that into intuitive, oh, this is how much I should be eating. I actually have a lot of clients who tell me once I get that they're reluctant at first, we get them to start tracking, they eat what is sometimes less than what they were doing before. And they feel fearful of that because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be hungry. But they actually say, I feel better. I have more energy. I didn't realize how much I was overeating before. And that to me is huge because there is all these recommendations about eat 2 pounds of meat a day, eat 3 pounds of meat a day, don't track all this stuff. And people get down the bacon, a pound of bacon for breakfast, or, you know, all of these things that macronutrient wise, they're the reasons why the energy is low. They're the reasons why they're not, losing weight. Yes, of course, there's some people out there that lose weight on a pound of bacon per day. I'm not talking about those people. But we have to super individualize and, biochemical individuality, all of that, and kind of take things in context with each person.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think I like talking with you so much because I feel like we're both kind of like the dark sheep in the room oftentimes. Um,
Yes.
and I don't hate it because like I didn't come up in the keto carnivore space. Like I was definitely hardcore ingrained and inundated in the bro diets,
Right.
evidence based flexible dieting space. And I get very, very, very frustrated with members of that community as well because they put all of the emphasis on the caloric, calories in, calories out model. That there was a post made the other day of someone that I competed against. It looks great, but he was like, look, the calories are the only thing that matters. I eat Reese's peanut butter cups every single day. And it's like, that's the wrong messaging too. Like I can't get behind
Yeah.
that. Like I think how we eat, how we vote with our dollar on the foods that we consume, the quality of those foods is all very, very important to us and the environment. But on the opposite of the spectrum, there's people in this carnivore keto space that are just like calories don't matter. Calories don't do anything. And those people, it's just like shoving a foot in their mouth, and it's just not a good look either. Like it's like, why can't both camps just get together, see where they have similarities and benefit so much more? But I don't
Yeah.
know.
I was going to say, why can't we all just get along?
Yeah, totally, totally. But who knows? Who knows? This is why it's therapeutic for me to talk to people with a head on their shoulders like yourself.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate that. No, and I think that, I respect like how long you've been in the space and all the information and, stuff you put out there. And, a same thing. Like I love kind of, there's a lot of similarities. And I think that it's helpful for people to hear that, see that, and know that there's answers. If they're not getting results, there's answers, and realize that there, are different ways and all of that.
100%. You and I are speaking at conference together at some point here soon. Is it the meat stock? What are we doing there?
Yeah, we have meat stock coming up. I think that's end of May. We're both on the metabolic health panel, so that's going to be exciting.
Nice, nice. Who else is on that panel? Do you know off the top of your head?
I think Benazati, and I think there might be one more. I don't remember who the fourth person was.
Yeah, that'll be good. I don't think you and I have ever spoken on a panel together that I
I
can
know
select.
it'll be first time. Super exciting.
Yeah, that will be good. I'm excited to meet for meat stock too. I've never been to meat stock, but I've been talking back and forth with them, and it just seems like a good vibe they got going there.
Yeah, no, I know. I know that a couple people that were there last year, and they really got a lot out of it. Said it was fun and had great speakers and all of that good stuff. So I'm excited.
Awesome, awesome. What else are you excited about? Anything else in the pipeline coming your way?
Let's see. So, working on some various different programs. I just opened up a wellness community, so I'm very excited about that, called the Wellness Collective. So
Nice.
that is for just kind of going beyond keto, beyond carnivore. I do weekly Zooms, dive into different topics: adrenals, thyroid, gut health, peptides, all the things. So not so much like macros. That's more of what my weight loss accelerator program is about. But just very excited to have opened up this space for women who want to just kind of get more information, and they're ready to know more of how the body works, and lots of discussion. And oh, the platform's completely off of social media, so that's a big bonus for a lot of people, as I'm sure you know.
What platform did you build it off of? If you don't mind me asking.
Oh no, I don't mind. So I have GHL, and it's a what is GHL?
Go high level.
Um, Go high level. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've never
So
used
it's
that, but I've heard good things about it.
okay, yeah. So it's built just basically through Go High Level. So they get a login. They can log in on their desktop. There's an app, and it's just no Facebook pages or anything like that. So it's really great.
Nice, nice. What about the horseback riding? You doing a lot of that right now?
Oh yeah. So I had a couple shows the last show last week, show this week, and then do that on a weekly basis. So I have two horses. I don't know if I told you that, but
You're
two horses.
competing.
One's yeah, I compete. One's 13, so she's a little considered a little older, and then I have a 6-year old. So
What are you doing? Like dressage, or what are you doing?
I do jumping. So we
Nice.
yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I knew you were into the equine sports, but I didn't know that it was jumping. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's such a balance because it does take a lot of energy, and I still want to keep up with like my lifting and strength and all of that. So it's definitely a balance, every week, depending on my schedule and of course work schedule and lifting and not lifting too hard or heavy on certain days and all of that. So um,
I've got a serious question for you here to close out.
yeah.
My mom is also an avid horseback rider, and
Oh,
she's doing keto now. She's been doing keto for like 3-4 years. I'm super proud of her. And I've got her into weight training. She's doing resistance training. She's actually sailing around the world right now, so she's just killing
oh
it.
my gosh.
But she's always been hesitant to weight train because she's always ridden horses, and she's just justified not weight training because she rides horses. And you do use a lot of muscles while riding a horse, but you, as an avid horsewoman and training enthusiast, you can probably attest to the fact that you got to do both.
I would not be as strong riding if I didn't lift as well. Because squatting is like sitting in the saddle. If I have to stand
Mhm.
up in my stirrups, that's basically like holding a squat. And I definitely feel on weeks that my lifting schedule is not as prevalent, or I don't have a lot of time and my workouts are shorter. I can definitely feel the difference as in my riding. So it definitely makes a huge difference. And upper body, my core strength, being able to hold my posture, all those things make a huge difference.
Yeah, I would think just like shoulder and back mobility from weight
Yes.
training, like maintaining proper posture in a saddle, is just going to be significantly benefited from it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And core strength is huge as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, she listens to my podcast, so hopefully she'll listen to this and be like, all right, I'm not going to skip leg day anymore.
All right, Mom, make sure you lift for your writing.
Absolutely. Well, Dani, always a pleasure. I'm excited to chat with you on that panel in May. Where do people go to
Yeah.
find out more about you and just dive deeper into your world?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website, nutritionthenaturalway.com. I'm on Instagram, carnivore.keto.fitness. I do weekly Q&A. I try to do Q&A on a daily basis in my stories, but for sure weekly. And then I have one-on-one coaching that you can find out about on my website. Like I said, private wellness community, the Wellness Collective, and my 7-week weight loss accelerator group program as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll link out, make it easy for people to find you. Dani, always a pleasure. Keep killing it.
Thanks, Robert. Talk to you soon.
Take care.